I'm Kirk Renner, the principal of Robertsville Middle School. We are very excited about the future of Oak Ridge Schools under the Robertsville graduate. We started this work obviously back in the spring, and we're excited to revisit that work now as we look at the launch of Robertsville graduate within the Oak Ridge Schools community. What excites me about the Robertsville graduate is really its potential to cast a vision for what we're looking for our students at each level of learning here in the Oak Ridge Schools, both at the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level. I was really excited about the work that we did as a school as we very intentionally looked at the different competencies that we want our students to be able to achieve at each level. We're excited that not only are we going to be able to be very explicit with our community members with what we're looking for from our students, but as we continue to build our measurement parameters for the portrait of graduate, we're going to be able to clearly assess our students' progress, again, at each level of their education. Not only are we looking at those key academic competencies that we've outlined in the set of keys, but we're also looking at those life and career skills that we all know are so key in a child's education. We believe that this can really cast a vision for what we want our students to be like and the skills we want them to achieve at each and every level of their education. That we're going to be able to create a lens in which we view each part of our programming and really look at, okay, does this piece of our programming academically fit into what we want in the portrait of graduate? So for me, when we talk about connecting the dots, I think it brings together everything in a very nice, almost is going to be the plate which all of our programs are going to be served on. So I think it's got great potential to influence our decision making at the school level and really at the district level as well. Again, I go back to what we talked about with the ability to create a very clear sense of what we want our entire, the whole child to look like at each level of their education. So I think not only are we going to be able, we've gotten so good here with TE21 and TN Ready and TVOS at really drilling down to the individual student needs from the academic perspective and using RTI to be able to intervene. But now I think with the portrait of graduate, looking at those 4 C's in our STEM education component, and really again, I go back to those life-ready skills. That's what, of all the things, that probably excites me the most, is the life-ready skills piece that we intuitively know is important for a child's education. They need to be good citizens, they need to be able to cooperate as a team, they need to be strong leaders, and now we're really trying to articulate what that's going to look like with our students. Teaching staff was able to provide input, and I feel like there was a vested interest on the part of our staff in creating these competencies for which we want to use in the portrait of graduate. So I think they created a great deal of buy-in on our staff's part, and I feel like the final product is something we can be very proud of.
Robertsville went through a multi-step process to arrive at our portrait of a graduate, and staff members were engaged throughout that process. Dr. Renninger initially introduced the concept in a full staff meeting, and we also discussed it in some smaller group settings after that, which for me was a grade level team meeting. The real work, though, began with the collection of data through a survey conducted in an Office 365 form. Every staff member had the opportunity to ponder each of those subtopics privately and submit their individual responses. The next step was to gather again as a full staff, but this time we met in small groups separated by subtopic to take a closer look at those survey responses. I was a PLC coach at the time, so I led one of the small groups, and our topic was career exploration. Dr. Renninger had asked us to take the data through a sort of coding process, so I had reviewed the data and suggested a handful of categories to use as a starting point for our group conversation. Our group physically coded the data by cutting it apart and sorting it into subcategories. Doing that physical sorting enabled us to see connections between the comments and also have a better grasp of the areas of emphasis that were emerging from the staff members' responses. Each of the small groups that day was tasked with consolidating the data into 2 or 3 statements that captured the overall subtopic. I remember looking around the room that day and thinking we were probably the only group that was physically sorting the data, but each and every group was very involved in that conversation, recording observations on butcher paper and having a discussion about how to best capture the spirit of all the individual responses in a collaborative statement. After our portrait of a graduate was combined with Jefferson Middle School, we also had the chance to review that document and provide additional feedback. What I really valued about the way Robertsville created our portrait of a graduate was the way we were actively involved in that entire process. Often when organizations are creating that type of guiding document, which tends to be a bit abstract, they appoint representative individuals to hammer out a draft, which is then just basically reviewed and approved by the large group. But that was not the case at all here. One of the biggest takeaways from my recent graduate work was a new perspective on leadership strategies. And research has overwhelmingly shown that when stakeholders are involved in that decision-making process, the outcome will be a much stronger product, as well as heightened buy-in over the long term. With the portrait of a graduate work, we definitely needed this document to represent our stakeholders, and Robertsville was able to achieve that because of the way our administrators led us through this process.
So as we look back at the creation of the portrait of a graduate, what I really appreciated was that each one of our staff members was able to provide their own personal take on each one of the competencies. And then when we sat down in groups to really create our final draft here at Robertsville that was eventually combined with the draft from JMS, those conversations were very rich, very intentional, and we had great discussion about the language and the exact wording that we wanted to have in there. And I think to me, that created a greater sense of ownership and buy-in on the part of our staff, because this really and truly is what we want for our students when they leave Robertsville Middle School. So I thought it was a very, very powerful process, and I look forward to really rolling this out as we go forward with the portrait of graduate work.